Chapter 1. On Christmas morning, my 7-year-old daughter handed me a note she found on the kitchen table, and by the time I finished reading it, I realized my own parents had left town without telling us, expected us to move out before they came back, and had already decided my role in their family was over. So instead of begging, arguing, or explaining, I did the one thing they never expected. I stopped fixing everything for them, and that quiet decision changed all our lives. The house was too quiet for Christmas morning. I noticed it before I noticed anything else. The stillness that pressed against my ears the moment I stepped out of the bedroom. No music humming from a speaker, no clatter in the kitchen, no low murmur of voices carrying down the hallway. In our neighborhood in Western Connecticut, Christmas morning usually announced itself before you were fully awake. A car door slamming as someone left early for Mass. A dog barking at the sound of wrapping paper tearing, laughter drifting through thin walls. That morning, there was nothing. I remember standing at the top of the stairs, one hand resting on the banister, listening as if the house might correct itself if I gave it a moment. It did not. The air felt flat and cold, like the aftermath of a power outage. I told myself my parents were probably still asleep, that I was overthinking it, that I had spent too many years waiting for things to go wrong. That thought followed me down the stairs. My daughter Lily was already awake. She was 7, all elbows and soft hair, and the kind of nervous energy kids get when they have been waiting for a day to arrive. She stood barefoot in the kitchen, still wearing the pajamas she had worn to bed, her hands wrapped around a folded piece of paper. She looked up when she heard me. "Mom," she said, and something in her voice made my stomach drop. I crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and knelt in front of her without thinking. Her eyes were wide and glossy, her lower lip caught between her teeth. She held the paper out to me like it might burn her fingers if she kept it too long. "I found this on the table," she said. "I think it is for you." The paper was plain printer paper, folded once creased down the middle. No envelope. No handwriting that softened the edges, just ink that looked too deliberate for a holiday morning. I took it from her and unfolded it. The message was short, direct. It said that my parents had left town for several weeks and that I needed to move out before they returned. No explanation, no apology, no mention of Lily, no acknowledgement that it was Christmas. I read it once, then again. My hands did not shake. That came later. I felt Lily's eyes on my face, searching for something she could understand. I knew what she was looking for, because I had been that child once. She was waiting to see if this was her fault. I forced my expression to soften and folded the paper back up. "It is okay," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You did nothing wrong." She frowned, unconvinced. "Are they mad at me?" The question landed hard in my chest. "No," I said. "They are not mad at you. This is not about you at all." That was not entirely true, but it was the truth she needed in that moment. I pulled her into a hug and held her a second longer than usual. Her body was tense against mine, like she was bracing for something else to fall. "Where are Grandma and Grandpa?" she asked. I stood up slowly and set the paper on the counter face down, as if that might make it less real. "They went on a trip," I said. "They should have told us ahead of time." She nodded, but the crease between her eyebrows stayed. Lily noticed things adults wished she did not. She noticed when rooms felt different, when people avoided eye contact, when words were chosen carefully. She looked around the kitchen. The coffee pot was cold. The dish rack was empty. My mother never left the kitchen like that, not even on a normal day. "Are they coming back today?" Lily asked. I shook my head. "Not today." She swallowed. Then she asked the question I had been dreading. "Where are we going to stay?" I opened my mouth and nothing came out. I had not reached that part yet. My mind was still circling the note, trying to understand how something like this could be reduced to a single piece of paper left where a grocery list usually sat. "We will figure it out," I said finally. "I promise." She nodded again, trusting me in the way children do when they have no other choice. I told her to sit at the table while I made breakfast. My hands moved on autopilot, pulling cereal from the pantry, pouring milk, setting a spoon beside her bowl. I kept my back turned so she would not see my face. When I had a moment alone, I reached for my phone. I called my mother first. Straight to voicemail. No holiday greeting, no cheerful recorded message, just a generic tone and silence. I hung up and tried my father. The same thing. I sent a text to each of them, something neutral, something that gave them an opening to respond without confrontation. No reply. I stood there in the kitchen, phone in hand, staring at the wall above the sink, where a framed picture of our family still hung. It was from a few summers ago, all of us squinting into the sun, smiling like everything made sense. They had planned this. That realization settled over me slowly, heavy and undeniable. This was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was not the result of an argument or a misunderstanding. They had packed their bags, locked the door behind them, and left instructions like they were canceling a service. They had left without telling their granddaughter. That was the part that made my throat tighten. Lily finished her cereal quietly and carried her bowl to the sink without being asked. She climbed onto a chair and peered out the window toward the driveway. "The car is gone," she said. I joined her and looked out at the empty space where my parents' sedan usually sat. The driveway was clean, no tire tracks in the snow like they had never been there at all. We stood like that for a moment, side by side, both of us trying to understand the same absence in different ways. I put my arm around her shoulders. "Go get dressed," I said. "We will open your presents in a bit." She hesitated. "Are we still doing Christmas?" I bent down so we were at eye level. "Yes," I said. "We are." She smiled then, small and tentative, and ran back upstairs. I stayed in the kitchen alone. I picked up the note again and read it a third time. The words did not change. They did not soften. They did not explain themselves. What struck me most was what was missing. There was no suggestion of where we should go, no offer of help, no acknowledgement that this would upend a child's sense of safety on a day meant to be about family. They had made their choice and stepped away from the consequences. As I folded the paper and slipped it into my pocket, a thought surfaced that I could not ignore. This was not the beginning of something. It was the end of something I had been pretending was still intact. Later, after Lily had torn into wrapping paper and lined her toys up on the living room floor, after I had smiled and laughed at the right moments, I tucked her in for a nap. She fell asleep quickly, exhausted by emotion she did not yet have words for. I sat on the edge of her bed and watched her breathe the rise and fall of her chest, steady and calm. I knew then that whatever came next, I would not let it be decided by a note left on a kitchen table. And I knew with a clarity that made my stomach ache that this was not just about being told to leave. It was about being erased quietly and expected to accept it. Chapter 2. I started noticing the pattern years before that morning, back when I still believed that being needed meant I mattered. When I moved back into my parents' house in 2017, it was supposed to be temporary. I had just finalized my divorce. Lily was still small enough to fit on my hip, and my mother insisted it would be easier if we stayed with them for a while. She said it like a favor, something generous, something loving. I remember feeling relieved. I remember thinking this was what family was for. At first, it felt manageable. I paid my share of groceries. I helped around the house. I told myself it was normal for things to blur when adults lived together. No one drew lines. No one needed to. The first time I noticed something shift was so small I almost laughed it off. My father asked me to look over a form for him. "Just a quick glance," he said, pushing a stack of papers across the dining table one evening. "You're good with this stuff." I was. I worked remotely as a project manager for a regional financial services firm, the kind of job that looked invisible to people who thought work only counted if you left the house. I spent my days juggling timelines, budgets, vendor contracts, all from a laptop at the corner of my bedroom. I skimmed the document, corrected a few things, and handed it back. "Thanks," my mother said. "You're a lifesaver." That word lingered longer than it should have. After that, the requests came more often. Can you call the insurance company? Can you help us with this online account? Can you put this bill on your card for now and we'll pay you back? They always paid me back, at least at first. When my younger sister Emily started graduate school, my parents were overwhelmed by the tuition portal. My mother sat beside me at the kitchen table while I logged in, clicking through screens she said made her anxious. Can you just handle it this semester? She asked. You understand these systems better than we do. I hesitated. Emily was 26, then old enough to manage her own life, but she had always been treated differently. Fragile. Promising. Too busy becoming something to be burdened. It's just easier if you do it, my mother added. We trust you. I put the payment through. That became a pattern too. Whenever something needed handling, it landed in my lap. Whenever someone needed rescuing from paperwork or a deadline or a mistake, I was there. Not because anyone forced me, but because I had been raised to smooth things over, to keep the wheels turning. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it was fair. I told myself that everyone needed help sometimes. What I did not tell myself was how rarely anyone asked if I was okay with it. There were moments when the imbalance showed itself clearly if I was willing to see it. One afternoon, I came home from picking Lily up at school to find a woman I did not recognize sitting in our living room. She was laughing with my mother, her legs tucked neatly beneath her on the couch, a glass of iced tea balanced on the armrest. This is Megan, my mother said brightly when she saw me. She's a friend of Emily's. Megan smiled at me like we had met before. She looked comfortable. Familiar. She's going to stay with us for a bit, my mother continued, just until she gets settled. I looked around the room. My laptop bag sat by the wall where I had left it that morning. Lily's shoes were kicked off near the door. Nothing had changed, and yet something had. How long is a bit? I asked. Oh, not long, my mother said. You know how these things go. Megan waved a hand. I won't be in the way. I nodded and took Lily upstairs, the conversation already over. She stayed for 3 months. During that time, no one asked if we had space. No one asked if Lily minded sharing common areas with a stranger. Megan ate meals with us, watched television in the evenings, left her things in the bathroom we all shared. When she moved out, my mother hugged her tightly and said, "You'll always be family here." I remember standing in the hallway holding Lily's backpack, wondering when that word had stopped including us. There were other signs, subtle ones. When something broke, it was assumed I would help pay for it. When a decision needed to be made, it happened without me, and I was told afterward. When I tried to set a limit even gently, I was met with confusion. Why are you making this so complicated? My father asked once when I hesitated about covering a repair bill. We're all under the same roof. That phrase followed me for years. Under the same roof. It was used to justify everything. If I stayed late finishing a project for work, my mother would sigh and say I seemed stressed. If I mentioned looking for my own place again, she would remind me how expensive everything had become. How lucky Lily was to have grandparents nearby. You're strong, she would say. You can handle more than most. I believed her. The doubt crept in slowly. Late at night, after Lily was asleep, I would lie awake replaying conversations, wondering if I was being unfair, if I was imagining things, if this was just how families worked. Other people had it worse, I told myself. At least my parents were present. At least we had a roof over our heads. Still, something felt off. I noticed how often my sister's needs came first, how quickly accommodations were made for her, how little explanation was required. When Emily wanted to take a break from school, it was encouraged. When I asked for quiet during a meeting, it was treated like an inconvenience. Once, after a particularly tense dinner, I overheard my mother speaking to a neighbor on the phone. She's such a help, she said, her voice warm. We don't know what we'd do without her. I stood in the hallway unseen and felt something tighten in my chest. Help. Not daughter. Not partner in this household. Help. There were moments when I almost spoke up. Moments when I thought about drawing a line. Each time, guilt stopped me. What kind of person complains when they have support? What kind of daughter pushes back when her parents are struggling? What kind of mother uproots her child when stability is right there? By the time the thought crossed my mind that I might be carrying more than my share, the arrangement had been in place for years. It was no longer a favor. It was an expectation. And I had been meeting it so quietly that no one noticed the cost. That was the part that hurt the most, realizing that my endurance had made everything else easier for everyone but me. I did not feel angry. Not yet. I felt tired of explaining, tired of adjusting, tired of wondering whether my needs counted or if they were something I was supposed to outgrow. When I thought back on it later, I understood something I could not see at the time. By the time they left that note on the table, they were not making a new decision. They were acting on a pattern I had helped create by never saying no. I just had not known how much it had cost me until the day it stopped being convenient for them to pretend I belonged. That realization stayed with me, heavy and unsettling, as the house settled into a silence that felt permanent, waiting for whatever came next. Chapter 3. I did not announce my decision. I did not send a message explaining my boundaries or list everything I had carried for years. I simply stopped doing what no one had ever formally asked me to do in the first place. The silence after that note settled into our days like a fog. Not hostile, not dramatic, just thick enough to change how everything moved. I took Lily to school from a borrowed car that week, accepted a couch to sleep on from a friend without explaining much, and kept my phone on silent more often than not. At first, nothing happened. That almost convinced me I was wrong. Then the emails started. The first one came from a utility company I recognized. It was polite, neutral, addressed to my parents, but copied to me because my email had been listed as a secondary contact. It said a payment had not gone through and asked for confirmation. I read it once and closed my laptop. For years, I had been the one who logged in updated billing information, covered gaps, when something slipped through. I had done it quietly without fanfare because it was easier than explaining why it bothered me. Now, I did nothing. The next message came 2 days later, this time from the university portal tied to my sister Emily's account. A reminder about an upcoming deadline. No accusation, just a nudge. I felt the familiar pull in my chest, the reflex to fix it before it became a problem. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then I pictured Lily sitting at the kitchen table, clutching that folded piece of paper like it might disappear if she held it tightly enough. I closed the laptop again. The first call came that evening. It was Emily. I stared at her name on the screen for a long moment before answering. "Hey," she said, her voice casual but tight around the edges. "Did you see the email from the school I did?" I said. There was a pause. Then she laughed lightly, like this was all a misunderstanding. "Mom said you usually handle that stuff." I took a breath. "I do not anymore." Another pause. Longer this time. "What do you mean you do not?" she asked. "I mean, it is not my responsibility." She sounded confused, not angry. That was worse, somehow. "Well, can you just do it this once?" she said. "I am swamped and Mom and Dad are out of town." I almost said yes out of habit. Instead, I said you should talk to them. Emily exhaled sharply. "They said to call you." I felt the guilt rise then, quick and sharp. The urge to smooth things over to keep everyone comfortable pressed in hard. For a moment, I wondered if I was being petty, if this was really the hill to stand on. Then I thought about how easily they had left, how little explanation they had offered, how none of them had asked where Lily and I were sleeping. "I am not handling it anymore," I said quietly. Emily hung up without saying goodbye. The call from my mother came the next morning. She did not ask how Lily was. She did not ask where we were staying. Her voice was brisk, all business wrapped in familiarity. "What is going on?" she asked. "We are getting notices about accounts." I waited, giving her space to say something else. She did not. I am stepping back, I said, from managing things. There was a sharp intake of breath. Why would you do that without telling us? I thought about the note on the table, about how much warning that had come with. I am telling you now, I said. This is not the time for this, she snapped. You know we rely on you. The word rely landed heavily. It sounded reasonable. Necessary. It always had. I rely on myself, too, I said, and on keeping my daughter safe. There it was, the line I had never drawn out loud. My mother scoffed. Do not be dramatic. This is about a few bills. It is about a lot more than that, I said. She sighed long and exaggerated. I do not understand why you are doing this to us. That was when it became clear. She did not hear me withdrawing. She heard me punishing. I am not doing anything to you, I said. I am just not doing it for you anymore. There was silence on the line. Then her voice softened, but not in the way I had hoped. After everything we have done for you, she said, after letting you stay here all these years. The guilt came back hot and familiar. For a second, I questioned myself again. Had I imagined the imbalance? Was I rewriting history to make this easier? Then I remembered Megan sitting comfortably on the couch, the way my laptop bag had been pushed aside to make room for someone else, the way family had been defined by convenience. I did not respond right away. When I did, my voice was steady. I am not discussing this over the phone. She hung up on me. Over the next few days, the pattern repeated itself. Messages came in always about logistics, always about what was missing, never about how we were. My father left a voicemail asking if I could just take care of one thing, just until they got back. No apology, no acknowledgement. I did not return the call. The consequences were small, but immediate. A late fee here. A confused email there. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to cause irritation. Enough to disrupt the smooth system they had grown used to. And with every new notice, I saw the truth more clearly. They were not reacting to my absence. They were reacting to the inconvenience it created. One night after Lily was asleep, I sat alone on the couch and stared at my phone. My mother had sent 3 messages in a row, each one shorter than the last. This is unnecessary. We need to talk. This is not how family treats each other. I typed a response and deleted it. Then another. In the end, I sent nothing. The guilt flared one last time, sharp and insistent. The voice in my head that sounded like my mother told me I was selfish, that I was making things harder than they needed to be. Then I looked at Lily's backpack by the door, still zipped the way I had packed it that morning. I thought about how quickly she had learned to carry her own things quietly, to stay out of the way when adults were tense. I was done teaching her that lesson. The backlash had not destroyed them. The house had not fallen apart. Life continued, just with a few more complications. They were suddenly forced to handle themselves. That was when I understood something important. The moment I stopped absorbing the impact, it did not disappear. It simply landed where it always should have, and that was only the beginning. Chapter 4. The quiet did not last. Weeks passed with a strange sense of balance. Not peace exactly, but distance, the kind that lets your shoulders drop just enough to notice how tense you had been before. Lily settled into a routine at my friend's house. School, homework, dinner, bedtime. Simple, predictable. I began to believe that maybe the worst part was over. Then the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, a local area code from Connecticut. I almost ignored it. Something told me not to. "Hello," I said. "Is this Ilara Whitcomb?" A man asked. "Yes. My name is Daniel Halverson. I'm calling from North Shore Lending. I'm a loan officer assigned to a file that includes your name." The words landed slowly. Loan. File. My name. I think there might be a misunderstanding, I said carefully. There may be, he replied, calm and professional. I'm calling because we're in the process of reviewing a refinance request connected to a property where you are listed as a co-signer. My stomach tightened. He continued explaining just enough to be clear. Back in 2019, when my parents had needed help securing better terms on their mortgage, my name had been added to paperwork as a secondary guarantor. At the time, it had been presented as a formality, a technical detail, something temporary. We just need your acknowledgement, he said, a signature to move things forward. I stared at the wall across from me, the chipped paint near the corner where Lily had once scraped it with a chair. I haven't lived there for a while, I said. I understand, he replied, but your name is still legally connected to the obligation. After we hung up, I sat there longer than I meant to, the phone warm in my hand. That was when the messages started again. My mother called first. I let it go to voicemail. Then my father. Then Emily. Finally, a text from my mother that read, "We need to talk." I did not respond. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time I answered. "What is this about a loan officer calling you?" my mother demanded without greeting. "So you heard from him," I said. "Of course we did," she snapped. "Why would you not tell us he contacted you?" I thought about the note on the table, the way information had been handled then. "He contacted me," I said, "not the other way around." There was a pause, then her tone shifted. Softer, familiar. "This is just paperwork," she said. "You know that. We just need your signature and everything will be fine." Fine for who I asked. "For the family," she said, like it was obvious. My father's voice cut in on speaker. "Elara, don't make this into something it's not." I closed my eyes. "I need to understand what I'm agreeing to," I said. "It's nothing new," my mother insisted. "We've always handled it this way." That was the problem. Emily called later that night. "Mom is freaking out," she said. "Why are you doing this now?" "Doing what I asked. Making things harder," she said. "They're stressed. Dad says the rates are time-sensitive." I pictured my parents sitting comfortably somewhere warm while Lily slept on a borrowed bed. "I'm not making things harder," I said. "I'm just not fixing them anymore." Emily sighed. "You're being dramatic." The next day, a message came from an aunt I rarely spoke to. "I heard things are tense," she wrote. "You know your parents did a lot for you. Sometimes we help family even when it's inconvenient." I stared at the screen, the familiar guilt trying to resurface. The implication was clear. If I said no, I was the problem. What none of them said was that signing meant reattaching myself to a financial risk I had spent years quietly absorbing. It meant staying available as a safety net without any say in how the rope was tied. I called Mr. Halverson back. "Can you explain exactly what this would mean for me?" I asked. He did, calmly, clearly. No pressure, just facts. When we hung up, the decision felt heavy but solid. My mother called again that evening. "We need this," she said. "You're part of this family." The word family sounded different now. Not warm, not protective, transactional. "I am part of my own family," I said, "and I have to think about that first." "You're overreacting," she replied. "It's just a signature." "It never is," I said. She went quiet, then tried a different approach. "After everything we've done for you," she said softly. There it was, the familiar lever. "I'm not punishing you," I said. "I'm choosing not to put myself back in the same position." There was a sharp exhale on the other end of the line. "So, you're just abandoning us," she said. I thought about how easily they had left us behind. "No," I said. "I'm stepping away." She hung up. Over the next few days, the pressure intensified. Calls, messages, people speaking on my parents' behalf, each one framed as concern, none offering to take my place. That was when it became undeniable. They did not want me back because they missed me. They wanted me back because the system no longer worked without me. If I signed, nothing would change. The same expectations, the same silence when it mattered. I sat with Lily one night as she colored at the kitchen table, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Are you mad at Grandma?" she asked suddenly. I shook my head. "No." "Are they mad at us?" she asked. I met her eyes. "I don't know," I said, "but I know we're okay." She nodded, satisfied. That was enough. When Mr. Halverson followed up a final time, I thanked him for the information and declined to participate further. "I understand," he said. "I'll note your decision." When my parents called again, I did not answer. For the first time, the consequences landed where they belonged, and for the first time, I did not rush to soften the impact. Chapter 5. After that, the world did not explode. It just got quieter. Not the lonely kind of quiet I used to fear, the kind that makes you feel like something is missing. This was a steady quiet, the kind that lets you hear your own thoughts without someone else constantly talking over them. By the time February rolled around, Lily and I were in a small 2-bedroom apartment in Milford, close enough to her school that mornings were not a scramble far enough from my parents' house that I did not have to drive past it unless I chose to. The building was older, the walls a little thin, the radiators loud at night, but it was ours. No one could leave a note on the table and make us disappear. I was not richer. I was not suddenly living some glamorous new life. My job was the same. I still logged on each morning, ran meetings, chased deadlines, and pretended not to notice how often people assumed remote work meant endless flexibility. The difference was that when I shut my laptop at the end of the day, the rest of my life was mine. The first week in the new place, Lily walked through the living room like she was touring a museum. She kept touching things, the couch cushion, the edge of the kitchen counter, the doorknob to her bedroom, like she needed proof it was real. "This is really ours?" she asked me one night as I tucked her in. "Yes," I said. "It is." She looked at the ceiling, thinking. "So Grandma cannot make us leave," she said. The way she said it was matter-of-fact, not dramatic, like she was confirming a rule of the universe she had not understood before. "No," I told her. "No one can." She nodded, and within minutes she was asleep. That was the first time I noticed how much her sleep had changed. Back at my parents' house, she used to startle at small sounds, a door closing, a phone vibrating on the counter, my mother's heels on the hardwood floor. Even when she slept like she was waiting. In our apartment, she slept heavy. She slept the way kids are supposed to sleep, limbs loose, face soft, breathing slow and steady. It hit me so hard the first night I saw it that I had to step into the hallway and press my palm against the wall to steady myself. I had spent years thinking I was keeping things stable for her by staying, by being agreeable, by making sure no one was upset. I had not understood that stability is not the same as safety. Safety is knowing you cannot be tossed aside on someone else's schedule. I did not hear from my parents for a while after I refused to sign anything. There were no apologies, no check-ins, no sudden moment of self-awareness. Just silence and then a handful of messages that sounded like they had been drafted in a hurry. My father left a voicemail once. "We need to resolve this," he said, his voice cautious, like he was negotiating with a stranger. "Call when you can." I did not call. A few days later, my mother texted, "This is not how a daughter behaves." I stared at the screen for a long time before putting the phone down. I did not feel the urge to defend myself anymore. That surprised me. For years, my reflex had been to explain, to prove I was still good, still reasonable, still the person they could count on. Without that reflex, I could finally see the situation for what it was. They were not upset because I had hurt them. They were upset because I had stopped making their lives easier. Emily tried once, too. She called late one evening while I was folding laundry. "Mom says you're acting like she's a monster," she said, sounding tired. "I never called her that," I replied. "She says you're making her look bad," Emily continued. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so clear. "This isn't about looking bad," I said. "It's about how she treated us." Emily exhaled sharply. You know she didn't mean Lily any harm. I held the towel in my hands and stared at the clean folds. She left a note where Lily could read it, I said. That is harm. Emily went quiet. Then she said what I had expected her to say. So what, you're just done with us? I'm done being used, I said. You always make everything so intense, Emily muttered. And there it was again, the same old attempt to shrink my reality until it fit their comfort. I'm not making it intense, I said. I'm making it clear. She hung up. After that, the messages stopped. Life went on. My parents did not lose their house overnight. No one got dragged away in handcuffs. There was no dramatic courtroom scene. The consequences were quieter than that, and in some ways more fitting. They had to handle their own paperwork. They had to answer calls they used to forward to me. They had to manage their own discomfort without turning it into my job. They were capable. They always had been. They just preferred not to be. In the weeks that followed, I noticed something else. The constant tension in my body started to fade. I stopped checking my phone every time it buzzed. I stopped anticipating the next demand. I stopped rehearsing explanations in my head before conversations even happened. One Saturday, Lily and I went to the library and then to a diner nearby. Nothing fancy. Just pancakes, a booth by the window, and the kind of ordinary day I used to think I did not have time for. Lily poured syrup over her plate with serious concentration. "Mom," she said suddenly, "are you sad?" I paused, spoon in my hand. "A little," I admitted. "Sometimes." She nodded like that made sense. "Are you glad too?" she asked. I felt my throat tighten, but it was not grief. "Yes," I said. "I'm glad too." She reached across the table and touched my hand with her sticky fingers. "It's better here," she said simply. That was it. That was the whole argument, the whole justification, the whole point. Better here. Later that night, after she fell asleep, I sat on the couch with a cup of tea and listened to the building settle. Radiators clicking, someone walking down the hallway, a distant TV through the wall. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. I thought about how long I had believed that loving people meant absorbing their chaos, that being a good daughter meant staying available no matter the cost, that being a good sister meant covering gaps that were never mine to cover. I had confused endurance with love. What I learned was simpler than I expected. The best kind of revenge is not watching someone else suffer. It is living a life where you are no longer afraid. If you've ever been the person who kept everything together, the person everyone relied on, and no one checked on the person who got called selfish the moment you drew a line. I want to ask you something. What do you think a fair boundary looks like when the people crossing it are family? And if choosing your peace makes someone else uncomfortable, does that automatically make you wrong? If this story hit close to home, tell me what part you recognize the most and what you would have done in my place. I read the comments, and I know I'm not the only one who had to learn this lesson the hard way.